to have more conversations with the rest of our team at another time. But I mean, I think in general, nobody's ready to make any decisions. We want to open a conversation instead of close. So apologies that we don't have full quorum, but I'm excited about the topics on our agenda. So I think we should just start digging in. And the agenda begins. Public comment. Do we have any public comment in the room that wants to kick us off, or any online? Sounds like no. Great. Well, we'll get to chat. Our committee tends to be very conversational, so I know we have a lot of guests and we'll be excited to get the conversation going. And then we want to kick off with the plastic bag ban conversation. We have Parker on there, but I can kind of tee us up. And then I know that we have Ken Brame and Anna Alsabrook to help us talk about that. Let's see, Hartwell's here as well. What I'll tee up on this is, I know that many community groups have been really doing a lot of homework and research about how we can address this issue with litter and this issue with microplastics and this issue that's impacting our waterways. From the city side, this is an active conversation we've been having for some time, and our city staff are doing really good work to look into what would regulation mean, what would it look like. So I love that we are looking broader than just the city to see what type of bigger conversation might be possible. And my understanding is this is the first time our commission at the county is talking about it. So like I said earlier, let's open the door and then start walking together wherever it takes us. And so I don't know if there's any other tee up, but I personally would love, I don't know if y'all are prepared with a presentation or anything, but that would be fantastic. Just kind of set the table for us.
Yeah. So while she's getting the screen share up, just a little background. There's been a coalition of local groups that have been working on this for 2 years. As part of that process, we've looked at, there's over 500 local governments around the country, cities and counties, that have passed these ordinances. 8 states have done it. There's actually some countries that have done this. So this is not something new. This is not rocket science. This is catching up with what many areas are already doing. Charleston, South Carolina, Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, communities in Florida. So it's not just the blue states that are doing this. It makes sense. Everybody's got the litter problem that we're looking at as well. So we've looked and we studied all of these around the country, or not all of them, but many of them. We've also looked at the follow-up research. What worked, what didn't work? You know, how they implemented, you know, what's enforcement look like? And we came up with a proposed model ordinance that we think is the best practices from around the country. And so what we want to do today is to go through with you why it's a problem, what the proposed model ordinance would be, and the legal basis for being able to do this, and then talk a little bit about, maybe briefly, on implementation and enforcement, and then open it up to you guys for questions. Does that make sense? Okay, I'm going to turn it over to the queen of plastic, or what the self-described plastic nerd who knows more about plastics than anybody probably in North Carolina. So I want to turn it over to Anna Alsabrook of Mountain Tree.
Thanks, Ken. Quite an introduction. My name is Anna Alsabrook. I'm the Watershed Science and Policy Manager for the French Broad River Keeper program based out of Mountain True. And we've been looking into this issue for several years now. We started looking at it more from a trash perspective. We've done probably 1 million river cleanups at this point, and the thing we pull out of the river the most is plastics. Plastic bags, plastic bottles, styrofoam cups, which are the worst because the second you touch it, it breaks up into 100 pieces, and then you try to pick those up and it's 100 more pieces. So we were just, you know, getting to the point where it felt like our river cleanups weren't really making a difference. And so we started looking at it to see if there was a way to make a more long-term sustainable dent into what we were pulling out of the river. And so we started looking into plastics specifically. And as we were doing that, we realized what a complicated issue it is. It is definitely a trash issue. Studies are showing that 1/3 of plastic waste ends up in the environment, which kind of makes sense based on what we were seeing. Scientists are predicting that by 2025, which is 2 years from now, there'll be 1 pound of plastic for every pound of fish in the ocean. And then by 2050, that number reverses. So 3 pounds of plastic per every 1 pound of fish. So it is definitely a trash issue, but it is more than that. It's a climate issue. Most folks don't realize that the oil and gas industry is behind plastic production. It is made from a byproduct of the hydrofracking process. And what we're seeing is as we as a society are moving towards solar, wind, and renewable energies, oil and gas is heavily investing in plastic production as their plan B. And 40% of that is actually geared for single-use plastic specifically. So that's stuff we may use for 12 minutes before we put it into the recycling or the trash. You can see from this graph here, this is from BP Oil. For 2020 to 2040, this is their oil demand growth chart based on everything that they work in. Plastics is that column on the far left. It far exceeds every other industry that they expect. Trucks, industry, cars, power, even power's going down even. In fact, if plastic production was a country, it'd be the 5th highest emitter of greenhouse gases in the world, emitting as much as 116 coal-fired power plants each year. It's also an equity issue, and it's based on where plastics are manufactured as well as where plastics end up end of life. This photo in the bottom left is from a group in St. James Parish, Louisiana. They're actively fighting a plastic production facility in their region. It's a region that's predominantly low income and communities of color, and they're faced with over 200 petrochemical and plastic facilities in their area. This area is also called Cancer Alley based on the exponentially higher rates of cancer that these community members receive based on the amount of toxins that get emitted into the air. Additionally, a lot of folks don't realize this. They put anything plastic into the recycling bin or trash and hope that it ends up into a new product at some point. Oftentimes what happens is we ship our plastic waste that cannot be recycled overseas. We used to ship it to China to have them deal with it. They closed their doors to us in 2017, and now we ship it to other places in Southeast Asia who don't necessarily have the infrastructure to deal with it. So it ends up in their waterways and their drinking water sources or being burned, and they're ingesting the toxins that way. Additionally, microplastics don't ever biodegrade. They just break up into smaller and smaller pieces that we call microplastics and nanoplastics. And we're seeing those everywhere, basically. Everywhere in the world, from the bottom of the ocean to the tops of mountains. They travel through wind and rain and snow. And so there's not been a study that's come out that has surprised me about where they have found microplastics at this point. Their studies are showing that we ingest about a credit card's worth of microplastics each and every week. And science is looking into the health impacts of that, but they are starting to see linkages between the presence of microplastics and the toxic chemicals that go into making them. And some pretty significant neurological, nervous, and reproductive diseases. So that's a lot of really negative news. We think the best way to combat most of this is to just have less plastic in our daily lives. And the easiest way to start is what we're proposing today. So we worked with, this is Nancy Lawson. She's one of the owners of Curbside Services and one of the operators there. And we worked with her to get a sense of how plastic bags specifically are interrupting their operations at their facility. What I really want to highlight here is that it's plastic recycling that's not gonna fix this issue. We have really high rates of recycling for cardboard and aluminum, but plastic is really complicated. And there's things that we can do about that, and one of them is to just have less plastic. So I'll let the video kind of speak for itself at this point. Oh.
Yeah, you got it.
Okay.
Nancy Watson,
Is that right?
turn your sound off.
When you log in, you have to share your sound. Don't you have to do something when you enter the meeting to share your sound?
I
or
think
something?
you're right, yeah. So unmute yourself, but don't turn your speakers. Thank y'all.
So this is all of the waste, and you can see that the majority of it is bags, right? Hi, I'm Nancy Lawson. My husband Barry and I are the owners and operators of Curbside Management, and here we are at our material recovery facility. The majority of what we get that we cannot accept is plastic bags. People should not put plastic shopping bags in their recyclables. We have about 18 to 20 workers that are sorting and separating our recyclables and picking out and making individual products. 60 or 70% of what our workers do here is actually removing plastic bags out of our system. Our landfill cost for just getting rid of the plastic bags alone is somewhere around $10,000 or more a month. An ordinance or a plastic bag, shopping bag ban would go a long way in helping us recycle more efficiently.
Pretty crazy. I love going there. It's fascinating to watch. So if you can get a tour of their facility, it's pretty cool. Also, what you don't know is there's a rat kind of running around her feet and while we're videoing, and she's so calm and cool about it. It's pretty neat.
So this is
Okay, so I won't spend a ton of time on this slide particularly because this is y'all's data. This came from the county's landfill audit from last year. What I did want to highlight is plastic films is about 10% of residential waste streams. And that's second only to food waste, which the county is already beginning to tackle with the composting program that y'all started.
What does plastic films mean? Is
Plastic
it
bags. It could be like
As
a
opposed
film
to
on the
art.
top of something, on the top of the jars, but most of it's plastic bags.
Yeah, unfortunately,
like soda cans or soda bottles? Okay.
right.
But if you think about the volume, it's plastic. I mean, 90+% of that's plastic bags.
Yeah, unfortunately, the data doesn't break it down specifically to shopping bags, but that is a not insignificant portion of the waste stream.
Okay, so what are we proposing to do about all this? Besides continue to pick it up and have it deal with it and have the extra costs for recycling and everything else. And we've, again, based on all of our research and working around the country, we've come up with a proposed ordinance that we think is best practices from everything we've learned. And we really wanted to focus on what's doable. Because it doesn't help us if we pass an ordinance that people can't follow, that's too complicated. So we're focusing on plastic bags at the checkout for retail establishments. And they would be required, they would no longer be allowed after this becomes effective. We would propose a 6-9 month period between when you pass it and it goes into effect for retailers to work their way through the supply chain and replace those with paper and things and giving us time to distribute stuff. But anyway, so bottom line is no plastic bags at checkout. Instead, and those would be prohibited, they could offer a 40% recycled paper bag. But our real goal here is to have people bring their own bags. And so to make that happen, and what is not included, by the way, is plastic bags for anything other than the checkout. For example, we're not saying you can't sell plastic bags for trash or for pet waste, that you can't, we're not going after cleaners having a bag over their stuff or things like that. But it's at the checkout counter. So that's what we're focusing on. And it also, like for bulk items in the in a supermarket, you could still have them there. We're not going after those. It's the ones here. So it's getting rid of those, and we found that through our research, certainly replacing plastic bags with paper bags has some environmental impacts. And so the idea would be is to minimize those. However, it's not a one-to-one replacement. We actually sent a couple of folks into Ingles, identical 16-item shopping list. One went through one checkout counter and got eight plastic bags. The other one went through and got everything in one paper bag. So that was an 8-to-1. The data we've used is the Chemical Council's numbers, which is 3-to-1, which is ultra conservative. And it shows a dramatic decrease in carbon by making this transition. Without a fee, it's going to increase paper bag usage 50% above what's currently being used. With a 10-cent fee, it increases at 10%. And that's based on the research around again. Several municipalities or county governments have gone back and added the 10-cent fee after the fact. We found that 5 cents doesn't move the needle, but 10 cents does. Yes.
It increases it by 50%.
If you without the fee,
Okay.
which is still a dramatic reduction in carbon footprint. So, that's a decision the county has to make. We would recommend the 10-cent fee, but if you don't think that's possible, and we also did research. And by the way, Buncombe County uses 132 million plastic bags a year. 132 million. But if somebody chooses not, by the way, the 10-cent fee is voluntary because you can bring your own bag. But if they choose to pay the 10-cent fee, the average per capita payment per year would be $3.36 per year is what it would cost them extra. So it's not a huge financial burden. Also, if you're paying with any kind of government assistance, our ordinance would recommended ordinance that would be waived for anybody paying with EBT, WIC, or anything like that. We're also good.
It'll cost $3.20.
$3.36. Am I correct? And I'm off a few cents.
$3.33.
33 cents. I exaggerate. $3.33 per person. Now, again, if you've got a family of 5, it's going to be $16, $17 a year. But again, it's us optional. We also are proposing a major giveaway of free bags to low-income communities. We were talking about having, maybe bags available at some of the community centers and certain neighborhoods in doing that. We haven't talked to the city about this, but we think it'd be a great idea if bus drivers had some bags. If they drop somebody off at a grocery store and they don't have bags, they offer some free bags, things like that. So, so that's there. The other thing we're focused on is polystyrene or styrofoam takeout. And that would be cups and those containers if you get takeout food. There's readily available substitutes for those. There's cardboard and paper and all those things that are there that are biodegradable and much better. We've reached out to restaurants, and Asheville Independent Restaurant Association is unanimously supporting this, voted to support it. So it's just a broad support, and we'll talk a little bit about the outreach we've done so far.
Do you know about the geographic distribution of air members? I know that like downtown, you can't really go to a restaurant without someone being an air member, but do we see a lot of air membership that's out of downtown?
A lot of them are not in downtown, but they are more concentrated in cities. But that would also include Weaverville, Black Mountain, etc.
We did also do a restaurant survey, which was just calling restaurants. And what we were trying to determine is, are folks using these products anyway? And the good news was most folks were not using styrofoam. The vast majority were not using styrofoam, and a small majority were not using plastic, which was good because that means it's just less of an impact on restaurants.
Yeah, and the other thing is that most of the major chains, McDonald's, Taco Bell, Burger King, all those already using paper and paper containers. So they're already there. So that's proposal. Our straws would be by request only. Again, would not impact hospitals, nursing homes. But if you go into a restaurant, you could ask for them, they'll give them to you, but it would just be plopped down automatically. I think. So to try to minimize use of those. So that's the bulk of the ordinance. Okay. Talking a little bit about enforcement. because one of the concerns, I know county staff has already got more to do than they can do. So we didn't want to ask. So we started really asking these municipalities, how many complaints a month are you given? And by the way, this would be like your lighting ordinance, complaint driven only. We're not expecting anybody to go around and inspect to make sure it's being complied with. But, so we said, how many complaints a month are you getting? And it was anywhere from 5 a year to a maximum of 15 a month. And most of those were more at the beginning, and then it dropped off after that. And the proposal would be is that you do get a complaint, you send a form letter. And while there's provisions for a fine in here, we didn't find anybody that actually got to the fine step with that. And here, the real deal is, I mean, yes, you can have a blatant example of somebody that you're getting constant complaints on. You might have to go out to that. I remember we had the mask ordinance. It was this restaurant down on Merriman Avenue that made the news, and that was the only one I know that they actually had to do any enforcement on. So it's not an issue. And also the 10-cent fee goes to the retailer. So county doesn't have to set up any kind of accounting or mechanism to collect and distribute those. And that takes away the argument from many retailers, oh, this is going to cost me more. They're actually probably going to make money on this deal because they're getting rid of the cost of that. So that's kind of the way we laid it out.
Hey, Ken,
Yes,
you say all big retailers immediately came into compliance.
right.
Walmart?
Yes. Now, Walmart in Charleston found a loophole, and they were selling a thicker plastic bag, calling it reusable. Our proposed ordinance closes that loophole. But yeah, they're doing it in 8 states and 500 local governments around the country.
So is Walmart offering paper bags in those
Yes.
areas?
So yeah, so Walmart's and Sam's Club's already not using plastic bags.
No, they, yeah.
Yeah, Aldi's, and Trader Joe's. There's a number of places that are already doing this. So it's not, and the Kroger's and all those, they're doing it in so many places. So just immediately they just fall right in place.
So the big question mark remains Ingalls.
Well, we've reached out to Ingalls multiple times, and I've got no response. We did a year ago before Ron Freeman, the CFO, who's our spokesman, retired. When Whistler on city council, I had reached out to him. They played tennis together. And his answer is that Ingalls will not oppose it as long as it applies to all retailers, not just grocery stores. But we have not been able to get an answer. I talked to Amanda Edwards, who knows the new CFO, and she was going to try to reach out to them. My sense is from that is they've had opportunities to voice any concerns, and they haven't. My sense is, and as you know, they're not wanting to be in the public eye on most things anyway. They're not going to oppose it. They're not going to support it. But if anybody's got it in with them, can get an answer, go for it. We've tried. We've had the mayor reach out. It's just they're silent on it.
Comes to the enforcement side of things, like I think of a lot of this, the person I think of most is like the mom and pop, just like trying to do their best. And so compliance, I see a lot of flexibility there, but if we don't get compliance from Ingalls.
Yes, that would be one where you would have to do. But in general, if some mom and pops choose not to do it, we get the big box retailers, we get the grocery stores doing it. You've got over 90% of this. And by the way, small paper bags are not included. There's no fee for that. So we didn't want to add 10 cents to the price of a McDonald's if somebody buys that. So we wanted to exempt it. We wanted to come up with something that was reasonable, that was workable and understand. So let's talk a little bit about that. Any other questions on that before we move to the legal side?
So go over a little bit more about why you're proposing the 10 cent, kind of go into the details of that.
Yes.
What you learned and why you're proposing that 10 cent fee.
To encourage people to bring their own bags and to reduce the use of paper bags. Again, yeah, you can do it. It's your decision on whether or not you want to include that or not. We would recommend it. You'll use significantly fewer paper bags, but it's also, and you take away the argument that, oh, it's going to cost me more for a paper bag than a plastic bag as a retailer. I think when they do the math and figure the ratio, they're going to come out ahead either way. But that's the 2 reasons to do it. But it's completely up to your decision on that. But either way, you're going to get you're going to get rid of plastic bags. and you're going to significantly reduce carbon footprint, but not as much as you would if you had more people bringing their own bags. But your decision on that. Yeah. Any other question before we go to the legal side? I'm going to turn it over to Susanna Knox, who's a senior attorney with the Southern Environmental Law Center, and she's going to tell you about their research and analysis that, why can we legally do this? So,
Thanks so much, Ken. So as Ken, I think, may have mentioned when he kicked us off, there are hundreds of local governments all over the country that have done this, as well as some states. And the ordinance that we're proposing is really a best practice that has emerged because this has been in place in so many places at this point, and it's an increasing number of places, really across the political spectrum. As he mentioned, one of the places that we've been in contact with about their implementation has been Charleston and Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. So it is not something that's, only happening in New York and California. It's all over the country. But as you may know, every state has a very, very idiosyncratic view of what local governments can and cannot do, and it has never been done by a local government in North Carolina. So that's where the legal questions may come in. This, again, it's because it's never been done. It's not like there's any case law on this, but we do think that there is really good statutory authority for local governments in North Carolina to act on this problem. The first source of statutory authority is the state's general ordinance making power. It allows local governments to regulate in areas that would rationally improve the general welfare, and it is interpreted broadly by courts. The second more specific source of authority is the North Carolina Solid Waste Management Act, and that is the statute that gives local governments authority to manage their solid waste. And not just authority, but it actually includes a mandate that local governments reduce solid waste at the source. So we think these are really good sources of authority under North Carolina law for local governments to move forward with this. We have drawn heavily on research that was done and publicized a couple of years ago by the Duke Environmental Law Clinic in their support of a similar ordinance in Durham. And we've done additional research to build on that. A lot of this research has been made public, and we have not really seen any convincing opposition that this legal authority is not there. So we remain really confident in the source of authority for local governments to move forward and address this problem within their borders.
What legal arguments do you anticipate? Like, what legislation will they come back? Like, what will they reference when they say, no, you can't do this?
Sure. So the only thing that we have seen is a letter that was written to the city by the Retail Merchants Association, and they argued that the Solid Waste Management Act, I'm paraphrasing, but they argued that that was not a good source of authority because plastic bags are not waste at the point of sale, that they're only waste after they're essentially thrown into the garbage. This has never been litigated in North Carolina. It's a North Carolina statute. So some of the arguments that they're relying on there have to do with interpretations of federal definitions of hazardous waste that have been litigated in federal court that is not applicable to the Solid Waste Management Act. There's no, again, that provision in the Solid Waste Management Act that mandates that local governments reduce solid waste at the source is not something that is equivalent to anything else that the Retail Merchants Association cited. I think that's a really strong point against their points. If you have to reduce solid waste at the source, I don't know what that means aside from the fact that you can't just start regulating it after people put it in the trash. So I don't think that argument was very convincing, but that is literally the only thing that we have seen.
Has your coalition raised any funds to support legal defense should the municipalities be have to pursue a legal conversation?
We all, my organization and other organizations, that I tend to represent all have internal litigation approval processes. So if the city or county were to get sued after passing an ordinance, we would have to seek approval specifically to intervene on behalf of a government entity. And I can't obviously guarantee that I can't speak on behalf of our organizations prior to going through that process, but that's something that we would anticipate seeking approval for.
Yeah, I don't mean to put you on the spot.
That was a lawyer's explanation of saying maybe, but yeah. We're gonna help.
Because I've seen him.
So we've worked with SLC a bunch. They're, in my opinion, the best in the business. And my experience is they don't get this involved if they're not willing to see things through. And so while Susanna can't really say yes, I'll go on a limb.
That was part of the coalition design, part of why you pulled this together, because that would be a conversation.
And I think that, maybe the things that I've just said and the questions that you're asking go to the fact that there aren't really, in my opinion, legal problems with the ordinance. To the extent legal issues are raised, they're really kind of political issues. And so, that's why it's up to our elected representatives to decide to move forward and do the right thing. And that's what we're hoping they'll do.
So I will say the retail merchants have historically been the opposition to these things across the country. Julie Mayfield has met with their lobbyists, and what he told her is that their membership is split on this issue. And I think that just shows that this is a different place than it was 10 years ago. I mean, Harris Teeter is going plastic free. I think by 2025, all the grocery stores Ken lists are already plastic free. So I think the landscape of opposition to this has shifted a lot. And so that's not to say they wouldn't get involved and oppose it, but I don't think it's a guarantee like it was. If you were to do this 10 years ago, you guarantee the retail merchants are going to sue you.
I think it's a nice lead in to some of the outreach we've done, the feedback we've gotten. So let me turn it over to Anna and let her quickly go through that.
Yeah, so we really wanted to get a sense of what.
I think Jennifer had a question.
Oh, sorry.
Well, I'm just wondering if so many people are on board, why the ordinance path, if there's a question on legality, why don't we do a massive outreach program, make bags available, do all the things that you're suggesting for voluntary adoption and see how that goes before we wade into the potentially murky waters of legality?
Well, I guess we would say there's not murky waters, that we're on very solid grounds legally.
Well, but
And
what I heard is we don't have an ordinance.
You could always get sued.
Yeah.
I mean,
But-
the fact that it has never been done before
Yeah.
is always a risk, but that doesn't mean the legal authority isn't there.
But
So
it was done.
It's been done.
So not exactly. It was done by the General Assembly that passed
Right.
something that applied to the Outer Banks and then repealed it. The legal authority for the General Assembly to do something is very different from.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
I agree. I agree. But the General Assembly did go back on it. And I would say that the General Assembly is more conservative today than they were then. So what is
The General Assembly
what's
also.
the general thought about poking the bear when it comes to the General Assembly?
Sure. So that is not my area of expertise, but I will say, I think Hartwell is right. Things are very different from what I think 12 years ago when that was repealed. It is becoming an increasingly bipartisan issue. The General Assembly did just
Yeah.
pass a law that.
And the House has passed for the third time a bill that would require a pilot program to deal with plastics, probably at the North Carolina Zoo, and a study to look at how we could deal with the significant solid waste product that plastics are presenting. And that passed with only one no vote. Now, the Senate has not taken it up the last 2 years. I don't know if they will this year or not. So that tells me that there is, I think there's a pretty general consensus that nobody likes to see plastic bags on the highways in their neighborhoods. So is it possible that, and the good news is this would have to be a statewide ban, couldn't apply just to Buncombe County or Asheville. Because can't be a local bill, which means it would have to overcome a veto, which would require every Republican to vote in favor of a statewide ban. The timing we're proposing here is you guys would hopefully pass this in September after they're out of session. It wouldn't go into effect until 6 or 9 months into next year. Typically, they don't do controversial things in election years. But the sense is that it is unlikely that they would do it. They could do it. I mean, they could do it. I don't put anything past our North Carolina Assembly with the current leadership, but it would require every single Republican vote to overcome the veto to make it happen. So it's possible, but unlikely.
And I think the reason not to do a voluntary ban is voluntary bans are often cited by the plastic industry as we're doing something, when in reality, they don't really work because you don't get Ingles, Walmart, you don't get the big retailers, and that's where 99% of plastic comes from.
Yeah.
And then the plastic industry says, look, we're doing something. We don't need to have this law.
The other thing is that what you're talking about is exactly what we're proposing that happens between the time you pass it and the 6 to 9 months later before it goes into effect. And we'll be talking, if we have time, we'll talk about that. We're looking at a significant, massive giveaway of free bags to low-income communities and to having them in community centers and buses and things like that. So that would be part of the implementation. But yeah, you will only get, if you don't get the big box retailers doing it, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, to that point, I mean, Target, Walmart, CVS, they all exist in these places that have already passed these bans, but they're not implementing it here because they don't have to.
Another reason that we would like the county to go forward is it looks like the city of Asheville is going to do something. Woodfin, Weaverville, Black Mountain are interested in doing something. We need one ordinance that everybody could opt into so that the rules are the same everywhere, there were implementation dates the same everywhere. So we don't have a confusing mishmash in Suffolk County. And we're looking for you to take the lead. And we think there's several other cities and counties that are looking for doing the same thing. Durham is doing it. We've reached out to Boone is interested. There's interest in several other cities, but it seems like nobody is willing to go first. I think if you do this, there'll be a number that follow suit within the next 6 months.
So when we were framing the ordinance, we really wanted to get a perspective from residents and business owners here on what would work for them and how it would impact their lives going forward. We did our own business survey and got pretty overwhelming support. Hartwell mentioned it earlier. Over 86% support a bag ban, 92% support a styrofoam ban. We sent this out through the chamber, through AIR, Leadership Asheville groups. We also went door to door and we called over 80 restaurants. And through that, we found 75% are already foregoing the use of styrofoam. So that's pretty significant data suggesting that moving forward on this would not be a big lift for business owners.
City of Asheville's.
Yeah, I'll get there. So also we wanted to make sure we weren't going to unduly burden the low-income folks, people who may have a hard time adjusting to the impact of an ordinance like this. We got verbal support and agreement from about 7 organizations that deal with these populations. And overwhelmingly, they were supportive of an ordinance like this. But more than that, their feedback really helped shape our rollout strategy on how we help educate and do outreach and do this reusable bag distribution to folks in that kind of middle ground from if and when a policy gets voted on to when it actually starts.
Did you do any rural outreach?
We did. We talked to ASAP. We talked to Nana, Homeward Bound, Beloved. I can't remember the whole.
Like rural businesses.
We did call some rural businesses and restaurants, and we're happy to send all that data over. In terms of residents, this says we have 3,000 signatures. It's been quite a while since we actually counted, so it's probably a lot more than that. And what I can say is this is the easiest thing I've ever canvassed for. I had people lining up to sign my clipboard. We went to farmers markets and bus stations and all types of events. So people are overwhelmingly supportive. y'all probably saw this, the city of Asheville did a survey a couple months ago, and that's not really our data to share. Maybe Maggie can talk more to it, but I did see presentations from city staff to the Sustainability Advisory Committee and the Environment and Safety Commission, and the results are overwhelmingly positive.
Yeah, there was nearly 7,000 respondents, which is the second most responded to survey the city has ever initiated. And 86% were in support. We had around 800 businesses participate, and they also shared high support. Now, it's voluntary. It wasn't, like a feasibility study for the bond where you're doing statistically significant, but still, that's nearly 10% of our citizenry that cared enough to be like, I'm really into this. So
So why are they voluntarily not taking bags?
A lot of those people are.
So the efficacy of that survey is questionable because if you look at the results, it's almost exclusively wealthy white people that answered. And 70+%
Around
of them.
20% were people of color, which is larger than our minority population in the city. So
I understand what you're saying.
I think it's a little bridge
Another
too far to say only wealthy white people, and there was no
I said
racial, there was no
over
economic
70%.
demographic information either.
There was a survey on income. It was an income question.
Okay. Let's pull that.
But the other part was that 70+% of them said they already take their own bags. You also said 75% of the survey was not using styrofoam already.
This is a different survey.
Right. Two different surveys. And I guess I'm asking, I don't want to be on the side of like arguing for single-use plastic, so please. But data is important. And quoting data is important and citing data is important, right? So I just want to make sure that we're clear that like these are not really scientific surveys, right? These are just trying to get a feel for the community, right? And I think that that's right. And I think that we do have a lot of support.
Yeah, I was gonna say, one of the things, many of the places we've gone to collect signatures have been a lot of younger people, and they're not high-income people. If you look at probably the average
Sure,
person that signed these petitions, many of those are definitely not high-income individuals.
sure.
And so I think there's strong support. Yeah, if I go out, there's a certain percentage of people who will oppose any regulation,
Well, yeah, of course,
but,
of course.
but my senses are just working in the community that there's broader support for this than anything we've ever dealt with.
There were also specific efforts made to reach lower income populations. So we had some folks go with the city survey to food banks and to bus stops. And so, I think the city was cognizant of that.
And I think the
we were
city's,
cognizant of it as we supported their efforts to get survey
I guess
responses.
I just wanted you guys to speak to that a little bit.
and they're continuing to fill those gaps. You're not wrong. There are some gaps in the city staff is what I understand is trying to fill those, trying to get more low income folks, trying to get more minority.
Yeah, and I actually, now that you mention that, I think even some of our staff is.
Yeah, I think you're right.
That effort, some of our case staff.
It's just,
Working with
it's
them.
harder to do as.
Oh, it's a bigger lift. It's a challenge. I agree.
And it was a challenge too, because
And
the
I'm-
survey was super long.
The other thing
Yeah.
I'll say about the survey is, the Merriman Road Diet, for example, survey had 4,500 responses, and it was like 58% in support. So I think what is important is, or what that tells me is that, first of all, most people don't care about anything the government does. They're just tuning out, right? Like, look at our voter rates. So to me, just seeing that level of support is just a finger in the air of there are a lot of people who are very interested in this, right? And so from a political side, that's helpful information.
Sure.
That the people who care or who are really opposed to this aren't coming out in droves, and they come out in droves about a lot of other stuff at us. So I think that there's value in that information.
We've also kind of reached out and had some informal conversations with some of the leaders in some of the housing, public housing communities. And have been supportive. They're tired of seeing plastic bags littering around their buildings. And they look forward to having reusable bags that would be sturdier, carry things in. So, I don't think you're gonna find any significant of opposition. other than they don't tread on my, I don't want any regulations kind of things, that thing.
Hey,
Just
this is
been a while.
Brownie. I've got a question.
Go for it.
Okay, and I know we need to, we're gonna need to move on to other agenda items in a minute to get through the other stuff, but how did you guys arrive at the $3 a year figure? I'm just curious. I mean, I was just like doing some back of the envelope math that if an individual's not bringing their own bags, they go shopping once a week, right? So it's 52. So let's assume they go shopping for groceries once a week. So that's 52 times a year. You get 2 bags each time you go shopping. That'd be over 100 bags at 10 cents. That seems like it'd be over $10. So I'm just curious, how did you arrive at the $3 figure for someone who's not participating in the Take Your Own Bag program?
Right, so we took national data to figure out how many paper bags are being used in Buncombe County currently. And then we added 10% to that. So we're assuming a 10-cent fee to the paper bag would cause a 10-cent increase in the paper bag usage, right? We divided that by Buncombe County population data to figure out per person, and then we multiplied that by the 10-cent fee.
Okay.
Actually,
Okay.
Brownie,
So just for clarification, you're not saying that the people who, for whatever reasons, don't choose to participate in the Take Your Own Bag program, it's only $3 for them. It would be much more for them. You're just saying you're just spreading that dollar figure across the entire population.
Exactly, yeah.
So for a household with 3 people, your $10 number is probably right.
Okay, all right, thanks
On
for
an annual
clarifying
basis.
that.
Yeah.
All right, so I know we need to, I think we had 20 minutes for this in the agenda, and we're over that, which is fine. It's a good conversation, but I know we do need to probably move on to some of the other agenda items in a minute. The one thing I would say, I appreciate all the information folks are sharing. I do think that there are substantive legal questions around this issue. And so one of the things I was going to recommend was that if there is interest in further consideration of this issue, that, in our commission meetings, whenever we're working on issues where there are questions around, there are legal questions around the issue. Obviously, most of our business needs to be done in open public meetings, but it is permissible and appropriate to go into closed session to get input from legal counsel on issues where there are legal questions or concerns. So that's something I wanted to suggest that our committee could do at an upcoming meeting, to just hear from the county's legal counsel around the issues around the permissibility of such programs in North Carolina. I mean, yes, this a lot of places around the country are doing this, but they're also in states where local governments generally have much more authority to carry out all kinds of different initiatives at the local level relative to the way things are done in North Carolina. So I think we do need to think through. We do need to.
Non-home rule states. I just have to say that.
Yeah. Well. I mean, I think if we do this, we almost certainly would be sued. So we need to understand from all perspectives what the legal issues and we just need to fully consider all that as we're contemplating these. So I wanted to suggest that for a future meeting.
It might be helpful to have Susanna there as well.
Maybe at some point. Yeah.
If you want it to be a closed session, I don't think I can be there
Okay.
because I don't have an attorney-client relationship with the county. So.
And just really briefly, we have kind of sketched out what a rollout strategy would look like. We would love if the policy were to get voted on. We think it'd be important to have about a 6 to 12 month period of time from the time of vote to when the ordinance gets implemented. And that's for a couple of reasons. That allows businesses to go through their existing stock of materials, as well as find alternative sources for new product. It also allows us a lot of time to educate the public and reach these communities, do these reusable bag distributions, and figure out how to plug up any holes of folks who may be impacted by the policy. We think getting getting grants and corporate donor sponsorships would be pretty easy. We've already heard from a few businesses around town who are interested in partnering on giving money or branding bags for this. From all the other municipalities we've talked to, nobody really put money to paid advertising because this is kind of a sexy topic, I guess. The media just picks it up and runs with it. And we've seen that because it's already happened. It's been in the news a lot lately. Just broadly, when we've spoken to other cities and counties that have done this, they've geared for about a third, like to gauge about a third of your population in terms of a bag. And that helps cover anybody near or below the poverty line and giving them multiple bags per household. So that's kind of what we're gauging on. Other places that did much more than that had a hard time getting rid of these reusable bags. So we figured we'd start with $80,000 to $90,000 and then go from there.
30K support.
80 to 90,000 bags, not dollars.
Oh, sorry. I did
Would that-
again.
The cost of 90,000 bags be covered by 30?
I think with corporate sponsorships, yes. 30 to 50. And
Is that the last slide?
yeah.
Yeah, any other, I agree with, looking at the agenda, we do need the second hour to cover other topics, but top of mind questions now.
And we're happy to meet with anybody individually if you have more questions.
And then, did you have any information you wanted to leave with us as well? Did you have anything specific that you wanted to share?
I think we sent the ordinance out.
We have lots of info.
Yeah.
So if you have any questions, you know,
I felt bad.
the good news is we've been talking to the city for like 5 years. And so every question that you want to ask, we probably have researched and written something about.
And we can send you some follow-up information if you'd like.
So it sounds like our next step would be, as we look at next month's agenda, to consider what a closed session, what we need to prepare for that so that we could go in that direction. Great, thanks for being here.
Thank you all very much.
Y'all
Having
you're
us.
welcome to stay to learn about Greenway bond criteria and the electrification study, or this is a very graceful time for you to leave. It'll be fine as well.
I would get out.
So let's
I'm
go.
gonna move to a back seat, and I want to stay for both of us. Maybe after
They're both very exciting. The electrification study will have you at the edge of your seat. I mean, I was very surprised about seeing financial numbers on that. So let's move over to the Greenway bond criteria follow-up. We spent some really good time talking about it last month. Welcome, Thomas.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today. I'm the principal planner of Buncombe County Parks and Recreation. We're going to talk a little bit about the Greenway criteria again associated with open pond project selection. Because part of my job here at the county is actual project management of our locally administered Greenway projects. Open Space Bond Project Manager Jill Carter was not able to make it to this meeting, but we do have with us here today Allison Daines, Director of Parks and Recreation here at Buncombe County, as well as Carol Peterson, who is the Chair of our Recreation Advisory Board. I am going to give a presentation today that's kind of based on some of the feedback that we heard from last meeting. Hopefully I can get through the whole, I'm going to ask that we kind of try to hold our questions, but we can get conversational with it if we need to. And then Allison and I can answer any questions you may have at the end of the presentation. So with that, at the last meeting, we presented where we were kind of in the open space bond process as it relates to the Greenway bond funds. And a quick refresher here is that the open space bond is a $30 million bond that's split 3 ways between passive recreation, greenways, and conservation lands, or conservation easements. We're still in the early stages of the overall process for greenways, but we are nearing completion of that first step there, the selection criteria development and approval. As stated last meeting, the Greenway criteria development involved a robust public engagement campaign with public meetings, stakeholder meetings, online surveys, and an open and continuous dialogue with the public and stakeholder organizations, all of which actually informed the evolution of our Greenway criteria, ultimately that evolution ended with our final 12 criteria that were presented last meeting being presented to and approved by the Buncombe County Recreation Advisory Board this past May. So as you may recall, the process resulted in Greenway criteria consisting of 4 qualifying criteria and 8 weighted criteria. These are the 4 qualifying criteria. The main feedback that we received on the criteria themselves last meeting was that the committee thought that there should be an emphasis placed on project costs and project feasibility. And we actually agree. And that is one of the reasons why we included them in both the qualifying and weighted criteria. Project costs, as they relate to us getting the most Greenway for our county dollars spent, are assessed in the leveraging of bond funds criteria you see here. Projects, in order to qualify, actually have to leverage bond funds. Feasibility is also represented in both the qualifying and weighted criteria categories. Projects must have completed feasibility studies in order to qualify for open space bond funds. And I need to mention here that feasibility studies do not guarantee that a project is 100% completely feasible and buildable. Feasibility studies, what they do during the study is they identify any red flags, obstacles, constraints, and opportunities along the Greenway corridor. They do not guarantee that all potential obstacles along the Greenway corridor have been discovered, but they are a good first step in understanding Greenway corridor's potential for development. So as mentioned last meeting, project costs and earlier this meeting, project costs and feasibility are criteria that can disqualify a project from receiving open space bond funds. Additionally, they are also considered in our 8 weighted criteria. On the left-hand side here, you'll see the criteria and their associated weights that are approved by our Recreation Advisory Board. The weights reflected in the approved criteria are directly derived from our public and stakeholder engagement process. So looking at feasibility as a weighted criterion, we wanted to evaluate each project beyond just having the feasibility study complete. We also want to consider things like general and hyperlocal support for the project, as well as things like, are there parcels or easements already obtained along the Greenway corridor that would make it more feasible? And on the project cost side of things, you'll notice that we include project costs in the leveraging of bond funds and project cost weighted criteria. In this weighted criteria, we will evaluate the rate in which funds are leveraged. Obviously, we want to get the biggest bang for our buck by prioritizing projects that are able to more effectively leverage bond funds. In addition to the leveraging aspect of this criteria, we also want to assess things like if the project is minimizing stream crossings, or is the project utilizing appropriate durable materials, and any other considerations that may unnecessarily drive up project costs. The staff believes that the inclusion of the project feasibility and costs in both the qualifying and weighted criteria are sufficient to emphasize their importance when distributing open space bond funds. One point of emphasis here is that we actually only had weighted criteria to begin with. The staff and the Recreation Advisory Board realized that they were important and broke them out into qualifying criteria as well as the weighted criteria. Taking all of that into account, we did hear your feedback in the last meeting and adjusted the weighted criteria on those two criteria. And this is what the adjusted criteria weighting could potentially look like on the right-hand side. And essentially what we did here was we took a percentage point off of the remaining 6 criteria, split that, and then added the 3 percentage points to feasibility and 3 percentage points to the leveraging of bond funds and project costs. The adjustment was made in this way in order to preserve the integrity of the input that we received through the public engagement process and various stakeholder organizations. Another request that we heard last meeting was you all wanted to see a list of existing projects. But before I present that list, I want to review this table that outlines the pros and cons of how greenways can be funded. Again, they can be locally funded, which is generally a much quicker process, but local municipalities must provide 100% of project costs. The other option is that they may be funded through the NPO, in which case the NPO provides 80% of the project costs, and the local municipality is required to match the remaining 20%. This is traditionally how greenway projects have been funded and built in Buncombe County. The disadvantage to utilizing this method is that we do not get to directly prioritize or pick the projects we want to be completed. The MPO prioritizes many regional projects, and they compete for funding with many other transportation and greenway projects throughout the state. I also wanted to quickly provide a general overview of the project phases as they relate to greenway projects that are funded through the MPO. So say we come up with a theoretical greenway project today. We would need to do our own due diligence and conduct a feasibility study. If that feasibility study resulted in a favorable recommendation of project feasibility, we could present that project to the MPO for prioritization through their prioritization process. And if our theoretical project was prioritized by the MPO, we would then need to wait until the project was funded through their allocation process. If the project received funding, we would then make sure to secure our local match. Once all of the money was secured for the project, we would then hire a consultant team to begin work on the beat of the project. The consultant team would actually then begin working on the preliminary engineering phase of the project, which they would get the initial greenway alignment, conduct initial landowner engagement, and come to about 25 or 30% design. After that, they would enter the right-of-way phase of a project in which they would generate right-of-way plans and actually work with the landowners on right-of-way acquisition. And finally, after all of the right-of-way had been acquired and all permitting was in hand, we would actually get to the easy part of greenway development, construction. And just for a general reference here, I believe that currently that particular project that particular process is about a 9-year process. So that's absolute best case scenario. That's 9 years. So now that we have all that background, I'll present the list of projects that are locally administered MPO greenway projects that are currently prioritized by the MPO. So these projects are already either on the STIP or the MTB. This first slide has all of the MPO projects in Buncombe County that are actually administered by us, Buncombe County. We currently have 3 greenway projects that are in progress. They're all funded and in the preliminary engineering stage. The Highway 251 section of the Woodfin Greenway will actually be moving into the right-of-way phase in late August. Beaver Dam Creek and Inca Heritage Trail are in the earlier stages of preliminary engineering. You'll see here that we also have 2 projects that have been partially funded, Reams Creek and Bent Creek. The preliminary engineering phases of these projects have been funded in 2029. They were actually originally funded in 2023. However, with statewide project overruns, the money for their funding actually got reallocated to 2029. Then we have actually 3 relatively new greenway projects on the scene here: the Fauna Flora Greenway, the Lake Julian Greenway, and the Owen High School Spur. The second list of projects is the locally administered MPO greenway projects that are in Buncombe County, but are actually administered by other municipalities within the county. So you'll see here that there are 3 City of Asheville projects that are funded and in progress, and 2 that are unfunded. And then finally, we have the Riverwalk Greenway that is in progress and being administered by the town of Black Mountain. I do want to mention here that there may be other greenway projects in our county that we're unaware of. For instance, there could be other stakeholder organizations or municipalities that are working on projects that just haven't come to light yet. And we would hope that those projects would actually come forward to us through our RFP process. So given all of this information and depending on the discussion that follows here, our next steps are represented here. This committee feels strongly about revising the approved criteria. We will bring the proposed revised criteria to the Recreation Advisory Board for review. Then after that, we will go to briefing and ultimately commission for adoption. So with that, I'll open it up for discussion.
I want to make sure I understand. So any of those projects that you showed us that go through the MPO process, all of those that you showed, the Black Mountain, the city, Buncombe County, 9-year process on any of those. I just want to make sure.
Correct.
The time you get that started to the end, it's at least a 9-year process.
Correct, but all of those would be considered, all of the ones that I'm showing would be considered at some point within that 9 years.
Process. But if there was those that you showed unfunded or what have you,
Yes.
those are going to be from the time the decision's made at least 9 years.
No, I mean, not necessarily. The problem with putting once even a project is in the list, right? There's this thing that's happening right now with all transportation projects, and I kind of mentioned it in the Reems Creek and the Mint Creek kind of projects, how all of those statewide transportation projects are going over budget. So it's forcing the NPO essentially to push projects years down the road. So I mean, just in the one reallocation, I mean, those two projects, the preliminary engineering got pushed 6 years. The NPO is actually kicking off their reprioritization process right now. That's about a 2-year process.
Just to prioritize.
Yeah, just to prioritize. So just to get on this list, it's a 2-year process. And then I wouldn't expect that there would be any funding available for 2029 since those projects funding did get pushed to 2029. So the MPO is actually expecting that this is going to be a slightly lower kind of year of funding, even for reallocation of funds. So the general thought is that it's going to be less projects that are funded with this prioritization, even after 2029. So yeah, it's really hard to put dates on these things. That's why I did the like absolute best case scenario, because that's like if everything moves smoothly.
9 years was best case scenario.
Correct. Yeah.
It's pretty shocking.
Okay.
What we found with the city too is like, I don't know, I think our numbers are, we've done 10 miles of greenway in the last 10 years in city limits. And what our programming has seen is even if we get resources in, it's just like a long play operation to do this. And it seems like this bond is a really exciting time for Buncombe County to get some work done, but it also just makes you think of like, what can get done now and what needs to start being planned now. If this is like a service you want to continue growing over time, you kind of have to play both.
So can you go back to the criteria that you, the adjusted one and the proposed one, so we can look at that, please? Okay.
I do want to note here that staff continues to recommend staying with the Recreation Advisory Board approved weighted criteria. That is our current stance and recommendation right now.
And why?
I think because of the extensive outreach that has already occurred. There's been a tremendous amount of conversation with various stakeholder and community groups. Looking at the criteria, because we have criteria that is qualifying criteria, it's almost like you're weighting cost and feasibility twice. It's like you can't even get into the program if you don't have a project that is leveraging funds, cost, and is truly has a feasibility study. And so it's already weighted at the front of the process. And so I think based on that fact that it's almost double weighted, we feel like the percentages that are here are representative of what we heard in the community that's consistent with moving the project forward.
So let me ask you this. Feasibility, like what I heard you say with feasibility when you talk about that, is that that's not necessarily, there's still a lot of unknowns with that feasibility. And partly what I hear in conversations is when I'll say for myself, when I say feasibility, partly what we're talking about is our ability to get the job done because of the fact that the greenways that what's been in the ANCA, right? Apparently they've been talking about it long before I was ever on the commission, right? So there's that long, and folks want to see us actually complete something, right? Get it accomplished. And so that's why we said, okay, let's make sure we get those accomplished. And I think that's part of it because we know there's such a finite amount of money there and we've talked about the reality of like how much money it takes and then how long that run is to actually get something else completed. So partly I think we're wanting to know like with those other funds, right? What is it that we can actually help get something, and it could be with the partner or whatever, but that is what we're talking about, like actually get something accomplished rather than just another piece here or there that, and maybe there's an argument, maybe that's the argument you want to make is that, oh, helping get these other ones started is beneficial. But from what I hear from commissioners and from the community is like getting some things actually accomplished where people can start using them. So I just want to throw that out there. Sometimes when I'm saying feasibility, that's what I mean by feasibility, which I think is different probably from the technical feasibility.
Yeah, it just really makes you think of like that challenge between like getting something in the queue with the MPO game or which would leverage our money in a really powerful way, or just going it alone and just like getting it done. Which is so hard. But I mean, the getting it done is pretty important, you know, to deliver on what people ask for, right? Is that?
I do want to mention that of the 3 existing projects that we have, and this is something that was mentioned last meeting, it is going to actually require Greenway bond funds to complete those projects. So they will officially be open space bond Greenway projects. They will be something, yes, and I mean, currently the Highway 251 section is on path to go to right away, like I said, in August. I think currently, just very loosely, these things change all the time here, but loosely it's slated to be finished with construction in late 25. So that is a project that I feel pretty confidently in saying will be done in the next couple of years, partially using open space bond funds.
How much money is left over?
There's going to be about 5 million, we think, currently.
Yeah. If we're lucky.
Yeah.
Right. And so I'm curious, from your perspective, speaking of what I was saying there, like from the perspective of what you've heard from the community with all the public engagement, what you're hearing, you're thinking this process then right here with this weighted is going to tee up some additional projects and help get those in the works, or kind of what is your thinking around that?
I think for me personally, I think there's 2 camps, but the big thing is that this is criteria for people, like the proposal is to put an RFP out for people to tell us, because we only know a limited amount of projects that exist currently through the MPO that has that list. And we believe that folks that are a part of that may potentially ask for these bond funds, knowing the constraint of time that is inherent within the bond funds, which also speaks to feasibility, because it's built in by virtue of that the funds have got to be spent within a certain amount of time, which is one of the reasons that the criteria for that is already kind of inherent in 3 different ways. And I think that folks that are potentially going to come out that may have projects through the MPO will be working over the course of the time as we're doing this development to shore up and get themselves in a spot so that they're asking for the proper amount of funds to bring their project to completion. And I foresee we'll see those. The other camp is the folks that are out there going it alone that we may or may not know about that are out there, but the only way that we could get to those projects is through a criteria-based process where we put out an RFP and then they are now speaking to all of these, and we have this informational discussion about what it'll take and their ability to meet those deadlines, is what I would say.
Can you go back to the criteria, please? Thank you.
Is there a fundamental assumption that the execution of this will not be the county? Because it's almost like a regranting or like a granting setup, right? Like, let me use different language. An RFP, people are going to apply to the RFP for this money, and that might be a municipal. Really, that would be a municipality. Like, nonprofits, maybe Pisgah Sorba would have the capacity for this, but it would be government.
We don't know.
But in that case, would Buncombe County submit
what am I trying to get to here?
If
Is
we
like,
self-submit
yeah,
projects.
because there's two different routes of like the county itself being like, we want to do this one. Let's use $5 million to do this versus like Weaverville has a cool project. And I feel like part of what we talked about last time is like, does the county just have a $5 million priority project that y'all would want to do as opposed to having an open RFP process? And I don't have a strong opinion, but I feel like I remember that being part of the conversation last time. Is like, with a small amount, do we want to go through a process like that? Do we just have something on the list that we want to do?
I think you're right. That's kind of how I remember the conversation. I think from a staff perspective, we were using ARPA as our model because we made ourselves apply to ARPA funds, and we competed against everybody else, and the commissioners decided, and that's what we did. So that's kind of what we were.
That's what you're recommending here, rather than like this committee go ahead and picking one using this criteria, and then the county, if there's projects, can apply to it just like anyone else. I'm guessing staff feels pretty strongly about that.
Yes, I would say that we do. We've done extensive community outreach, and in a state and age when we really are trying to reach out into the community and look at things in an equitable and inclusive manner, that's the approach that we would want to take. And so if we have projects, they would be measured against any other potential projects that exist out there, and people would be on, kind of the same footing for a process in order to further their projects.
But that means that, the commissioners ultimately
Have that decision.
get to decide. And
right.
If this committee, as a group wants to make changes, then that's up to them. But we'll go back to the Recreation Advisory Board, just like we did for Ag, and have that conversation. So.
But also the idea of going it alone, having a project that you just want to do, is counterintuitive to raising the percentage of leveraging bond funds. So if we increase the weighting on leveraging bond funds, and we say we just really want to pick a project that we want to get done, that's in opposition to those to increasing that percentage.
Yeah. So essentially, this would be saying municipalities who apply would be pretty competitive.
Right. Put money in the pot.
And they do the work. So from like a staffing side, on your point, you all wouldn't tie up or have to hire capital projects, whatever actual execution.
I have a question. I'm sorry if I missed this earlier, but these are criteria specifically for investment of the bond funds around Greenway projects, right?
Correct.
Then why does having leveraging bond funds on the list, how does that even make sense?
It's the same as the easement criteria. We made sure that we were leveraging as many funds as possible to minimize the expense, the ask of bond funds.
Okay, so that by leveraging, that means leveraging of like the MPO funds for the bond funds. Okay, I just thought it meant, okay, thank you for clarifying. That makes
municipal money.
Just some other money in additional to bond.
Any other funds or
Okay.
grants that exist.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because the MPO money is going to be hard to. The MPO money will be very hard to leverage unless it's the projects that are already on the top of the list. Because the MPO money, I don't know when the bond money needs to be spent. I feel like 7 or 8 years.
2029.
It's a gamble if you could actually leverage MPO money. So the real leverage potential here might be smaller than we would once hope. So
the other big source of leveraging funds that we've been successful in is TDA funds, and those can oftentimes deploy much faster. So there's a lot of other. I think the MPO stuff is problematic from a timing standpoint, but there's other sources too.
Yeah. So.
Look, we don't have a quorum here today, so but I would just make a suggestion. That we move this process forward. I don't think we should put this on the agenda again because we don't have a quorum. I would just make a suggestion that we forward this on to the county commission for review, I personally do support the adjusted weighted criteria, and frankly would even take those pieces further than what's outlined here. Because as Terry was saying, to me, it's not just, is there a feasibility study complete? Like check this box, yes, no. It's really looking at like, how feasible is this really? You know, can this project be completed within 3 years, 5 years, 8 years, or 10 years, or maybe never? Like, it shouldn't just be like a yes, no question. There's a study that's been done, but like, if there's one project that could get realistically done in 3 years and another one that might be a cooler project, but it's 10 years out realistically, I think our community wants us to see things get done. I think people are just frankly kind of like skeptical we can pull this stuff off. So I think the feasibility should be ranked very highly. And I think the project costs should be ranked highly too, because if there's one project where you can build, you know, several miles for a few $1 million and another one that you can buy, you know, build a half mile for a few $1 million, like we just don't have that much money to commit to this. So we should seek out projects that are as cost effective as possible and put and rank that highly. But I can live with this. So, but that's where I would land on it.
I do want to point something out, that feasibility doesn't come usually in the form of the amount of time that it will take. That a feasibility study does not guarantee, nor can it guarantee, the amount of years that it would take to build. It's solely based on the other things that Thomas had previously talked about, like slope, looking at how many parcels that you're going through, like the kind of high level theory of something being able to be built. But a feasibility study, just so that you know, does not include this project will take X amount of years. Like it does not do that. Just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, I do. I totally understand that. And are you saying that this, when we say 18% feasibility, that means that if there's a feasibility study that's been completed, it would get the 18% weighted criteria? Or
no, not necessarily. I think there's going to wind up being, you know, like there's going to wind up being, there's going to need to be kind of a subset of, if I have a feasibility study from 2009 that's coming through on a project, and I have a feasibility study that is done in 2023, I would say that the feasibility of the 2023 would probably wind up getting weighted higher. And that we would need to suss out, like, these are the high level weights of each of these criteria, but there'll be subsets underneath, so that there may be a potential that someone is getting 5%, but the 2023 study may get the full 18%.
Yeah. Okay.
Because it's more accurate.
Yeah. So, and I don't want to just keep repeating myself, but like I wouldn't just kind of, you know, say this is just about a study being done, or even how recently that study was done. But I think when I think about the feasibility, I would hope that it would really look at, kind of based on all the information we have available from the studies and just, you know, anything else, like how likely do we believe the project can be completed over like the short term, medium term, or long term? Like we should sort of really like assess, like rank, like we think this can be done in 3 years, or we think it's 5 or 7, or frankly, even if we work on it really hard, it may not be able to be completed within 10 years, and give a lot of prioritization that for projects that could be completed realistically within like a 5-year period. Like I would rank that really highly if it's a good, you know, it's otherwise a good project, over something would take a decade to do.
And that's part of, I think, the application piece that comes out of the RFP. It's not a check the box feasibility, yes or no, and that question is answered, but the series of questions that follows to help us get at exactly what you're saying. Right. What is, not just the feasibility of, is the slope right, and are there few enough parcels, but can we get it done? And that comes, I think if Jill were here, that I think this is what she would be saying, is in designing that application material and that RFP to make sure we capture all of that necessary information for making the decision.
Great. So I feel like, Brownie, your suggestion, I'm seeing heads nod of, doesn't need to come back to this committee move on to your full commission, you're hearing clearly that time to get it done is really important to the committee, and that you'll account for that in how you communicate it as you move to the commission. Does that sound like I summarized that well, everybody?
Now, Brownie, are you suggesting that they bring this criteria right here to the full commission and then we have that discussion at the briefing? Or with both, or are you wanting to go ahead and make a recommendation on which criteria at this meeting?
So like I said, I would support the adjusted weighted criteria. I mean, if Terry and Maggie, if y'all feel the same way, we could make we could recommend the commission go ahead and adopt criteria, and we could weigh in on the fact that although we didn't have a quorum, the committee members who were here do support the adjusted weighted criteria. But I mean, I'm fine with both of the recommendations going forward to the commission to consider, and the staff can share why they think they still support the original criteria. We could share why we think there's some good arguments for the adjusted criteria. So we could forward them both to the commission, and the commission can decide.
I think so, because I want to weigh what staff said a little bit more.
Yeah.
Is it okay if I say something?
Sure. Yes.
What I'm hearing is time is of essence. Everybody feels the same way. I feel the same way. I think the community does. The bonds pass, people want to see something they can put their boots on the ground on a greenway and say, this is what we voted for. I think that's what we're looking at. I think that's the bottom line. If what you all, and Brownie, Mr. Chairman, I think I'm hearing you say that you want to take this new recommendation to the commissioners. What we need to remember is the commissioners have appointed a rec advisory board who has gone over this thoroughly, who agrees with the staff. I always holler, I'm sorry. Who agrees with the staff about the outreach that they've done, the many steps they've taken to bring this to the advisory board. We have seen this twice in our board meetings. We've had time to go back and recommend to the staff. What we recommended is what we see on the left side of the screen. If you go with what's on the right side of the screen, changing those 3 percentage points on those two different situations, in my opinion, it's going to have to go back to the commissioners appointed at Recreation Advisory Board, a month away. It may pass, it may not pass. Time to come to the commissioners, 2 months away. We're talking time, y'all. 3, and this is my opinion. It's my opinion. You leave it like it is on the left-hand side, we proceed. That's my thinking from the commissioner appointed advisory board. I think that's what they'll say. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman.
Sure. Thanks for your thoughts on that. Appreciate it. And I mean, these are not far apart. I mean, honestly, honestly, I think it's just, we should just get the commission to vote on this and decide. I mean, these numbers are not that far apart.
All right. Does that give you what you need to move forward?
We'll be back at briefing and we can have a discussion and we can further this conversation at that point. So thank you.
Great. Thanks for all the work. Thanks for the work on the question too. This is exciting. All right. Again, a graceful time to leave should you want to. Welcome to stay. So now, Jeremiah, you'll share a little bit about the green building resolution and the electrification study, and then you'll also do a floating solar update. So, we have till the top of the hour, so use that time as you need.
All right. Well, hopefully this won't take a super long time. We got a chance to talk about this. And mostly last time we talked about batteries. And my general sense, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that there's a lot of excitement about that. So I don't know that I need to spend a ton of time talking about batteries anymore.
Great.
What I'd like to talk about is the electrification piece that we didn't really get a chance to dig into much. And that's really specifically around could we potentially update and enhance the language in our current building policy to start to address decarbonization as well as simply just green building policy. I pitched a couple of ideas last time. We didn't have a lot of time to discuss it, but I got a tentative thumbs up. And so really all I've done is just take our current building policy and add a little bit of language to it that I'd like you to see. and give me some feedback on. So I'm going to share my screen there. Oh, I just miniaturized everyone. Let me try that again. All right. And I will read it for everybody because it's, well, it's pretty big, but I'll read it anyway. So this is our current building resolution, right? Yeah, get on close on up. I'll make it.
I'm trying to elbow way in. I'm just
No,
interested.
absolutely, man. So, basically, this required a LEED Gold standard for all new construction and major renovations. So what we talked about last time, and this added language is here, and I gotta, Brownie's head is in the way on my screen, so I gotta move him around here. Hold on. It's not your fault, Brownie. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
So one of the things, and actually this was something that came from our general services director, was our previous policy was about being solar ready. We want to just skip to the end and say, instead of solar ready, let's just make it a requirement, right? So any new construction would require facilities be designed with PV unless it's found to be not technically feasible to do so.
On county.
This is, yeah, we don't have the authority to do anything. Yeah, I know. It would get exciting to.
One day.
Things. We're gonna continue to push down that road, but this is a county policy. Facilities being designed to and constructed to include all electric equipment shall not include gas fueled equipment or infrastructure, again, unless found to not be technically feasible. The caveat to that would be that does not apply to potential backup or emergency generators. Where feasible, the county will install, and where county fleet vehicles will be parked on site, facilities will install electrical vehicle charging infrastructure. And before I go any further, I do want to also say this is a resolution, so it's not meant to get into the weeds. It's meant to be pretty high level. So there's a reason we didn't say this many vehicle charging stations, and it's staying pretty high level, and that does also give staff the leeway to make some of those more detailed decisions based on what the facility is going to be used for, et cetera. The other addition would be, where technically feasible, existing gas fueled infrastructure should be replaced with an all electric equivalent upon the end of its useful life. Again, the caveat of like technical feasibility is the only thing that kind of gives me heartburn, because
it'll be subjective.
Yeah, but that's why I want to continue the process of taking these major decisions to the board with a life cycle cost analysis to help inform that decision-making process, and to give the board the opportunity to give us their feedback on these major decisions, because some of them will be major decisions. As we talked about last time, at least a little bit, electrification is not always easy. If a facility has been designed with gas in mind, it could take a major overhaul of that facility to switch to electric, and that could be incredibly costly. So we need to do the analysis and bring that to the board and say, we want to do the right thing, but we also want to be upfront about the fact that this is not a cost-effective project. We want to do it because we think it's the right thing to do. So I want to sort of keep that in there. I think that's really it. That's really it. Those are the major changes. My goal here is, again, because battery storage, as we saw, is in many instances very cost effective and ready to go, especially where we've already installed PV. Electrification is not as simple, right? It could take significant dollars. It could take, a lot more time and energy. And what my goal was here is to create some additions to this policy that will just force us in that direction, rather than trying to say, well, this boiler is only 5 years old, we need to replace it today. That just doesn't make sense, right? But what we can do is force the hand of the folks that are going to be doing this 10 years from now, because I don't know if I'm still going to be here. I hope so. And sort of push them in that direction, right? So anyway, I was hoping to get a little feedback on this language, concerns about it, questions about it.
Have you sent it to us yet?
It was in
Was it?
the email I sent,
Okay.
or that Jackie sent, I think, out to the group.
Okay, I just missed it.
So it's out there, and it is posted on our website as well, and in the agenda materials, so. Any high level thoughts, any details, you didn't do enough, you didn't, I'm happy to entertain any questions or concerns about that.
I have a question.
No, not you. Anybody else? No, I'm just kidding, I'm kidding. Sorry.
What about oil? Does the county have a lot, like oil fired boilers or any oil? Does that oil need to be mentioned at all? Or-
No, not really. I mean, we gotta, no, the answer is no. There's not enough for that to be a concern, I think, or be addressed by this policy. But I do think, maybe, well,
Yeah. and
maybe one
that
thing,
Second bullet, you could say,
Yeah.
shall not include gas or oil in the case that in the future something weird happens.
yeah, that's true. That's true. We can make a note of that.
That's not a bad idea, but it's good to know that that's not a driver
It is
right now.
definitely not enough of it to worry about. And most of those things they're going the way of the dodo anyway, so it's small. But it's a good question. It's something I can easily tack on, and it's not gonna be a substantive change, so. Any other questions, concerns,
I think
thoughts?
it looks great. I mean, I feel like it signals the values that we talk about in this committee a lot while allowing analysis and reasonableness in decision making. So it's not dogmatic. It gives subjectivity so that if there's a situation where the finances are just bonkers and inappropriate, that decision can still be made in a different direction. I think it's nicely done.
Thanks.
Yeah, I agree. I think I really like it. I wish there were some way to kind of say, I mean, I like that it doesn't just say, we'll do a financial analysis and decide each time whether to do it or not. I'd rather have it be kind of the default decision, like we're going to do this, right? But yeah, I wish there were, but obviously, I mean, at the end of the day, if there are some projects that are just so expensive to do that the benefit of it wouldn't make sense compared to other places you could put those resources to maybe do a whole lot of other really cool clean energy stuff. So, but I think anyway, I think it's good. I totally support it.
We don't have the ability to vote on anything today. But given that at least one other commissioner was kind of the reason I did this.
We know is into it.
I'm assuming he's going to be supportive. I did just very quickly want to give our general services director a chance to weigh in. If he has any thoughts or wants to throw rocks at me.
No, no rock thrown. I agree with him.
Okay.
Yeah, highly supportive.
Yeah, and I did obviously share this with him in advance, and we've had discussions about it, but just wanted, again, his staff is going to be the one most impacted by this. I get to stand on the sidelines and cheer. They have to actually do the work. So want to make sure everybody's on board, but I do think we have a lot of support with this. I would ask potentially, this is a current resolution. We want to make changes to it. I'm not entirely sure what that process looks like.
From this,
is it just a new resolution?
It's just a new resolution. I mean,
old
if you have the old resolution, if it's numbered or dated, I just reference it and say that we're amending it.
Okay, simple enough.
Process wise, Terry, Brownie, sounds like there's support. How would you all want to move forward?
Typically, when we're able to vote on it, then we take it to the commission. Because then we say, well, the climate and environment approved this, right?
I wonder if there's a way that we can vote over email where we highly suspect Parker will be interested.
Yeah.
We can wait till next month too, but I don't know if there's a rush.
We don't have to vote on it. We could, go straight to the commissioners. So, I mean, I will say for the fleet facility, we basically, ended up with all but like one of them, the charging station.
Oh, there's charging stations out there.
There will be, but anyway, so I think there's support.
Yeah, so
from the commissioners.
I would say there's not a massive rush because the facilities we are constructing, we're really trying to follow this already.
Right.
those that are sort of on the table for design,
We're looking at it.
we,
Already
you know,
communicated that.
again, because we've,
Internalizing this already.
right, so,
Maybe
you know,
save it when there's like a big crisis and you can bring this to the table and be like, we're doing a good thing.
yeah, that's right, that's right. If anybody wants to just fight over plastic bags next go around, we can just,
Do this. Yeah.
this would be the icing on the top. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Brownie, did you want to say something?
Oh, no. I think, I mean, I feel like it'd be fine to send it on to the county commission.
Yeah.
We know Parker's totally into all this. And so I think, I mean, obviously we would probably vote on it if he were here today. But we could say, you know, it was reviewed at the committee meeting and now it's forwarded on for commission review. I mean, mostly just because I feel like our time in these meetings is so tight and valuable. I wouldn't want to take up another 10 or 20 minutes at another meeting reviewing this again. So
Absolutely.
especially when we know Parker will.
Totally fair. Yeah, and I'll take care of that process and get it on the agenda, go through that. We'll figure it out and I'll bug through and make sure I'm not doing anything wrong. So,
Awesome. Give you one liner whereas to add.
Okay, great. The next part is, we have 15 minutes and there's only 5 on my calendar, so we're actually ahead of schedule. So it was just a super brief update on the floating solar project. And actually Brownie is probably just as able to give this update as I am because we've had multiple meetings put together. Where we're at right now is we are working with Duke Energy to get them to give us permission to do an interconnection study at that site. The way that works, and again, just high level oversimplification here, you can't do an interconnection study on a site unless the landowner gives you permission to do that, right? So there's a site control sort of necessary. Well, Duke is the landowner, right? And so we've had some discussions with them. We've had some meetings with their engineering staff, and the good news there is that the engineering staff doesn't see any technical reason why this project could not move forward. But again, the other side of the house at Duke, that's not the engineering staff, needs to give us permission so that we've got something in writing. I even wrote the letter for them, just like one less barrier, like here's the letter, just sign it. But as you can imagine with the utility, that is not as easy as it sounds. It's unique and something they've never done before. So we're working on it. We do have to have that interconnection study application in their hand by the end of this month. Otherwise, we got to wait till next year. The way they do it is it's a relatively new process, but they do cluster studies. So they'll take groups of applications and sort of study them all at once. The deadline for that is the end of this month. So if I want to get it into this next round of cluster study, I've got to get that application on the door. So it is time sensitive that we get Duke to give us that permission. And Brownie has had multiple conversations and has reached out to the folks he knows at Duke. And I don't know if you have any updates on that, Brownie, but that's kind of the status.
Yeah, I've been bugging Jason Walls multiple times each week for the last couple of weeks. I texted him this morning to see if he had an update. He hasn't responded back, but he has been very responsive and talking to the folks that we think are the right people to give the nod to signing off on this, in their Charlotte offices. And so I think Jason's going to try to help us get this done. It doesn't need to be like a formal lease agreement or anything like that. Like literally an email saying we support the interconnection study moving forward, and we reserve the right to raise concerns or in the future. It doesn't have to be some like binding legal agreement. Basically, just anything that would be in writing saying we're fine with an interconnection study being filed at that location. So hopefully, even though it's a huge bureaucratic organization, we can get something from them along those lines by the end of the month, so that, when we had the call we had with their interconnection staff, as Jeremiah said, that was really positive. I mean, I'm excited that the project looks, is looking more and more feasible from an engineering standpoint. But if we don't get it in this month, we could still file the interconnection application later. But from what Duke has said, it won't start getting actively studied until the following year. But if we can get it in now, it'll go like almost right into a study process, which would be awesome.
Yeah, so I mean, that's kind of the update. We're working on it. Once we get Duke's permission to do it, I'm ready to file. I also would really love to not have to do it with next year's budget. I have the money now, so I really want to get that done.
Yeah, and this would be for a 9 megawatt AC project. Tentatively, I mean, it could change, but like,
It's huge, yeah.
That's kind of the plan for that isolated area on Lake Julian. So for our area, I mean, that would be the biggest project that's ever been built. It would be about twice the size of the landfill project.
So I have one piece of kind of neat information that I read actually just a couple of days ago, that New Jersey now has an 8.9 megawatt floating solar array that just went live this last week. It makes it the largest floating solar array in North America. And my first thought was, I got you beat.
Yes.
We can only buy a tiny sliver, but we can beat you. So it would be literally the largest floating solar in North America if we were able to pull this off. And man, that excites the heck out of me. But you know, I's to dot, T's to cross. We got things to do. So.
Awesome.
Hey guys. I actually have to drop off. I've got to take my mom to a doctor's appointment, so I need to sign off right now. So, but great to see everyone, and have a great weekend. Okay.
Thank you.
Hey, Brian.
And that really gets us to the end of our agenda. We do have upcoming meetings and announcements. Do we have top of mind what the rest of the summer kind of topics are?
Yep.
We do, and my main question this would be for Commissioner Sloan and Commissioner Wells about the water quality grant criteria and what your timing is and when we might want to add that to the agenda. I went ahead and threw it up there for July, but we have plenty of other items to talk about. But knowing that could be adopted as part of the budget, I just wanted to keep that in our minds. So
That might be a good first meeting, because Parker and I did meet and discuss it, and then in all reality, I was kind of waiting to make sure it looked like it was going in the budget for any more time in it. But it's looking positive, so I will look into that. And so you're thinking July 21st, we could.
we can take a first glance at that.
Yeah. Okay, that will work, because the sooner we get that started, then the sooner we can get that rolled out.
And the other budget item was the Green Bank pilot funds, and so they just want to have a quick conversation if those get adopted in the budget, what our next steps would be. So that would be the next meeting. And then I put the water quality grant criteria on there twice, just because we might want to have a second go at it. Sure. Knowing this group, we like to talk. So that's just generally, that's kind of what's in SharePoint from a staff perspective, but it changes after our meetings, we adjust. So, okay. And do note that we don't have a November meeting. We combine November and December into that single meeting because the holidays get in the way. So.
And for the Green Bank pilot rollout, will the Blue Horizons when is the Blue Horizons RFP decision making? Because that partner is important, right? With who we would have for the Green Bank to help.
What's the deadline?
Closes Monday.
Closes Monday.
The application.
The RFP deadline is Monday, so proposals have to be due to us on Monday. We will obviously, as staff, get together and start reviewing proposals pretty much right away.
So by the July meeting, do you think you'll have a decision?
I would think we will know which direction we're going.
According to our RFP timeline.
Well, it seems like the pilot, those two go real hand in hand, right?
Yes.
And so
Yes.
at whenever, and I assume that would bring back Green Bank friends to be on that call too. So okay.
Yeah, the goal would be to have Melissa and Jen join us again. And
then perhaps whoever that community partner is, like, who's going to execute, because then that's a lot of work to do. Awesome.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's like a plan. Okay. All right. That's it. Thank you.
6 minutes early.
Happy budget season to all. I wish everyone luck.
Yeah.